Well, hello, cinephiles. Welcome to OnFilm. I'm Philip Martin, and I'm your. Well, this is my column on the internet. So normally I would be writing a column, but things are such that we don't have space for it. So we have bandwidth, so we can do it this way, which is actually really kind of nice because it frees me up from the I don't know, the formality of typing it out on a keyboard and actually thinking things. Kind of like just, I don't really prepare for these in case you don't haven't noticed. So it's just sort of a free form look inside what we're doing this week. And what we're doing this week in our movie style section is the same thing we do just about every week. We look at what's coming to theaters, and there's a little bit more coming to theaters because some more theaters are open now. Unfortunately, I've not been able to find out exactly what may be opening at the new theaters that are opened yet. So the only thing we know for sure that's opening is this movie called Sputnik, which I was really excited about. It's another IFC film that they're releasing to, drive-ins and the few movie theaters that are open. And I thought it was going to be either a documentary or a drama about the Russian space program and Sputnik. And turns out it is not. It is a horror movie, and Piers Marchant is handling that for us. And I haven't seen it, and I probably won't see it until and after I get some really good feedback from it, because I'm not that kind of person. I just don't look for horror movies. The movie I reviewed this week I really like, and it's really one of those that I think is going to be it's one of those that if you don't like art movies, if you think art movies are slow, if you think that they're, sort of pretentious, you're going to hate it. But if you're somebody who goes to the theater wanting to see something that puts you off balance, that you can't guess the next scene, this is it. I mean, it reminded me a lot of the work of Terrence Malick, or as some friends of mine around town who are friends with him say, Terry. I can't quite do that, but Terry Malick, yeah. But it reminds me of that in the way it gazes at nature, and it looks at the natural world around us as we are, kind of flailing our way through it. It's an interesting film, and it starts out in a timeline of 1999, a few weeks, November, before Y2K, before the big, or what some of us thought, was going to be the big chaos that the flipping over of the cosmic odometer would bring. And it stars Stellan Skarsgård. I should say right now it's a Norwegian film, and it's in Swedish and Norwegian with subtitles. In case that's still the barrier for you, the 1 inch barrier. But it's set in 1999 initially, and you have Stellan Skarsgård as this 67-year-old man who is returning to his native Norway after spending a whole lifetime in Sweden. And we find out pretty quickly that he's just lost his wife in a car accident where he was driving, but he doesn't feel guilty about that. He just feels loss. Okay. While he's moving in, or he's just moved into this farmhouse kind of in the rural outskirts of a village place, he's sitting there alone, which is what he came there to be. He came there to be alone. And he hears some noise outside, a guy calling his dog. So he wanders outside, and the guy who's calling his dog is somebody he knew back in 1948 when he was 15, 52 years before. And the The other guy happened to be 10 years old then. And you flash back to that summer of 1948. We're still in Skarsgård's character now, played by a younger actor, obviously. Tron uh, spent that summer with his father in the woods, in a cabin in the woods in Norway, um, while his sister and mother stayed at home in Oslo because I love this line because his father said he couldn't think around women. And obviously, his father had some things to think about. And Tron gets to go with his father. You never know his father's name either. You know, it's one of those films that a lot of characters are known as Tron's father and John's mother. And he has his friend, John. And John and he go out during the day while they're... And they ride horses that belong to this wealthy landowner that's near them. They trip through this forest and then they, you know, jump on the horses and they ride around, you know, and they call that out stealing horses, even though they're not really stealing horses. And it's a one. I don't know whether it even is something that the, you know, the landowner, the owner of the horses would object to. Okay, and you know that's how they spend their days. And then one day his friend shows up at his house and things are a little bit off and he doesn't quite understand exactly why they're off, and they go out in the woods and they ride the horses, and then afterwards they're climbing trees and his friend takes these really exquisite tiny birds eggs out of a nest and he looks at them and you think he's just, you know, wondering at the intricacy of this. Instead, he takes the whole nest and he crushes it and drops it to the ground and screams and runs off. And they roll back over to where they're going. As they roll across the river in silence, he gets back to, you know, his house, and his dad tells him the story of what happened the day before with his friend and why his friend might be acting that way. And turns out his friend is the older brother of Lars, the man he meets in 1999. And it turns out that outstealing horses is both the name of this game, and it's also was a kind of a code, was a euphemism that they used in that part of Norway during the war for conducting operations against the Nazi occupiers. The film presupposes a little bit more information, a little bit more knowledge on the behalf of American audiences than the typical Hollywood film. You need to know that during World War II, while Norway was occupied by the Nazis, Sweden, its neighbor, which with it shares a long border, was a neutral country. And it maintained this neutrality all kinds of really weird ways. I mean, sort of, yeah, the Nazis could come in there and then other people could come in there, and, you know, Stockholm was kind of like this neutral city. It was a very strange thing. So you need to kind of know that to understand some of the dynamics of this. But the story is basically about that last summer in 1948, which was the last summer that Tron saw his father. And it's also about 1999, where he's sort of accepting or not accepting guilt for some of the things that happened in his life. And it's a hard movie to boil down to a 5-minute synopsis or to write a review about without revealing a lot of the plot points. But it is, you know, it's well acted. Skarsgård's great. The other actors, who none of them I recognized except for the woman who plays his wife, who you only see after she dies, is an actress that I didn't look up her name, but she plays Ethel on the restaurant, the Swedish show I've been kind of talking about on and off for these last few weeks. So, you know, if you watch a lot of Swedish TV, then you watch a Norwegian movie, some of the same faces, you know, pop up. I think the same dynamic applies if you are a fan of British TV, like some of my friends are. I watch a lot of British shows on the Acorn Network or something, and you'll see them in movies, and it adds a little to that. I mean, it's sort of, I was watching The White Day again, which is a movie that we reviewed back in the before we shut down for COVID and everything, but it came out on DVD this week, and the actor in that movie is the second fiddle to the chief of police in the Icelandic TV show Trapped, which is great. There's 2 seasons on Amazon Prime. If you've got Amazon Prime, watch Trapped. But he's the kind of ineffectual sort of Barney Fife character in that show. But then he turns up in this movie, and he's playing a cop, and he's just this really, fierce sort of kind of tough guy character. It deepens. The more you see, the more you know, the more connections you make, the more fun it is. At least that's the way it seems to me. So, we got The White Day. Yeah, we got Trapped. We got The Restaurant. And we got Out Stealing Horses. And I should throw in there that there's another Swedish series we just finished. And it's kind of, I'm not talking about, The Restaurant is sort of like a little bit better than Downton Abbey. And it has the same sort of soap opera kind of appeal to it. I mean, you're just watching these people go up to the edge and come back down like they're good, and then they're bad, and then they're evil, and then it's sort of like championship wrestling. You see these different arcs that are very broad and very preposterous. Now, Out Stealing Horses is a very naturalistic drama in that it feels... In fact, I said this when I was watching it because I'm ignorant. I said, I bet this is based on a true story. I bet this is a real story. And it's not. It was based on a very popular, very successful novel that came out in 2003, which has the same title in English. It was a Norwegian writer, and I didn't read it, but I did go back after I saw the movie, and I still don't remember this being a big book, but apparently it was a huge book, and people all over the world were excited about it. But I read the synopsis of it, and I realized that for the movie they cut a lot out. They streamlined it. They cut out a major subplot, a lot of characters. A lot of the movie, there was a lot of doubling in the movie. Like there's a set of twins, but in the novel there were 2 sets of twins. So, and the phrase, of course, Out Stealing Horses has the different meanings, as I explained. So, I missed that, and I, sort of like, that's okay. We can't keep up with everything. We can't read every book. We can't see every movie. We can't be cognizant of every series. We're always going to have gaps in our education. We're always going to have these things that we don't know about. But the more you do fill in those gaps, I find the better the experience is when you're watching a film like Out Stealing Horses. And I will say this, too. It's sort of like I'm watching this film, I'm reading the subtitles. If I spoke Norwegian or Swedish, I would probably get more out of that, too. So, there you go. But, we all have our limits. We all have our limitations. We all have what we're willing to, how far we're willing to go to experience and enjoy things. I mean, I think it probably helps a lot if you know something about music when you're listening to music, but you don't have to know anything at all to get a lot of joy out of it. So you don't really have to know any of this stuff to love the movies or to love a particular movie. But my position is always like the more you know, the better it is. Okay. And you probably agree with that if you're putting up with me and reading, reviews and you're doing that. I'm just saying that that's not the only way to look at it. All right. But finally, I want to go back. One more Swedish TV series we just finished is called Blinded, which was based on an actual scandal in the Swedish banking industry in the early 2000s, but it is just preposterous. It's just this wild soap opera about a reporter who, for once, they get the reporter kind of right in that she lives in this really awful place. She doesn't have this luxury apartment, doesn't drive a BMW, that sort of thing. Usually, reporters are, they take them up a couple of classes in these projects. But they don't in this one. But she is sleeping with the president. I think he's the president. I think he's the president of this big bank. He's not the chairman of the board, but he's the guy who's responsible for the day-to-day operations. And the bank is, doing some shady stuff on their trading. And she ends up investigating it and writing all these stories. They eventually bring down the bank, and I guess that brings down their relationship. He's married, she's got a friend she uses who's inside the bank, and there's terrible consequences with that. And it's just this really over-the-top sort of thing. And there's the penultimate episode is really good because that's when they're scrambling to try to find a buyer for the bank, and they're all trapped in the building, and she's watching from across the street with the cameraman and trying to get some information about what's going on through her sources and through just kind of eyes on telescopes, camera lenses with telescopic lenses, watching what's going on. So Blinded is on Sundance now, and the restaurant's on Sundance now, and there's another series on Acorn TV called Rebecca Martinson, and it stars a woman that we got to know on the restaurant, where she was the evil. She married into the family, and she turned out to be evil. Put it that way, the main family. And here she is, the damaged attorney who's doing detective work in this small town in the far north of Sweden. Okay, so what can I say? I mean, I'm sort of like, it's warm in Arkansas. It's not hot. It's warm in Arkansas in August, and watching Swedish and Norwegian shows are sort of a good remedy for for thinking about the oppressive heat. That's so. Anyway, let's see. This is how it goes. I talked about. My pick this week is Out Stealing Horses. But I understand completely if that's not the sort of movie that you're into. So, Tenet has got an opening date, and it is less than a month away, and we will see how that goes. My feeling is, and I've expressed this several times, but every time there's always somebody new watching, isn't there? We're not going to get theaters open until product starts rolling, and we're not going to get product start rolling until we get theaters opening. Theaters are starting to say they're going to open. So they're opening, I guess. Tenet is coming September 2nd. It's going to be huge for theaters, so they better open to accommodate it, I guess. So, and after that, we'll see what happens. Mulan, of course, went to Disney Plus, and we heard all about that last week. Courtney Lanning wrote about that last week. So, we've got that. That's about all we got. I mean, normally this would be a dead time of year for movies. It is the tail end of summer. This is one of those dead zones, Sargasso Sea type things, where they would release a few films that would not be highly promising. So we're really it's kind of a wash. I don't know. I hear Sputnik's good. I've heard it compared to Alien. I don't think it's that good, but we'll see. And I'm not the horror guy, so we'll see how that goes, and it may turn out to be good. Out Stealing Horses, I think, is probably not going to be one of the best movies of the year, but it's one of the best movies I've seen so far this year. And again, with all the caveats I put out, I think that if you're interested in movies that you don't know what's happening next, you'd like this. But you have to sit through some, really arty stuff. And if you don't like really arty stuff, well, okay, you don't like it. There's some violence, but it's not like it's not like an action film or something like that. So that's 20 minutes. That's about all I want to do. So we're going to cut this off, and we'll see you next week. Take care.